Couples therapists, without breaking confidentiality, what are some relationships that instantly set off red flags, and do you try and get them to work out? I saw a couple that was doing retaliatory cheating and telling each other about it. When they got through their anger, they decided to call a truce and made peace. With their level of emotional maturity, I doubt it lasted. I don't know if I helped them or prolonged their suffering. It was their decision to come to counseling. So I think it was the help they wanted. Other clients realize what they really want is divorce counseling. What's the best way to behave civilly and minimize damage to the kids while we go our separate ways? 1. Couples in a tit-for-tat arrangement. For example, I cheated so you can have one night to cheat with whomever. Or I violated your trust and did drugs. You can go out and do whatever for one night. It erodes trust and compounds the hurt. 2. An affair that won't end. I've never seen a relationship bounce back where a partner is still in contact with their GFBF. I don't mean an ex-GFBF. I mean the person X is having the affair with. Or is lying about it. 3. Control to an excessive amount. I most commonly see partners having to send pictures holding up a certain number of fingers or proving that it's a live picture. This is abuse. 4. Overbearing parents and in-laws. I understand there's a ton of cultural nuance here, and I work with couples who have arranged marriages, as well as the South Asian community. However, when a spouse is more allied with their parents and calls them on speakerphone for fights, or often speaks ill of their partner to their parents, I usually see these couples stay very unhappily married for years. It's sad. If it's not abuse and a partner is willing to end an affair and genuinely work on it, I'll help support. I think couples therapy is sometimes helping couples have the courage to voice what they really want. And that may be separation. Edit. Added another. And thanks for the awards folks. Edit 2. I can't ethically dive into some of your comments or give specific resources. But get in touch with your local crisis line or community service agency and they can direct you. Wishing all of you the best with your relationships and in-laws and parents. Edit 3. I answered some of the common questions in the comments. I intentionally have to be really vague and I can't comment on specific cases. It's unethical. I won't be able to respond to any more comments because this blew up far more than I ever expected. But thanks for reading. I hope this helps open the door to therapy for you or your loved ones in tough situations. If it's any help, I'm a therapist who goes to their own therapist. Also, some of these situations are nuanced. Some are not. I'm not saying sharing your location with your partner is abusive, or that sending a picture to your spouse is. Therapists get a ton of data and history and information that helps us better understand what's going on. Sometimes, there's a dynamic between two people and they can set off a cycle. Read Sir Johnson's books for this. Love Sense and Hold Me Tight. Other times, I think it's unethical to assume a partner was hit because they deserved it or set their partner off. That's not okay. Please reach out to your local agencies and crisis line if you or a loved one needs help. Contempt. When I experience true contempt from one in the relationship, I know it is usually over. Look towards a peaceful ending at that point if possible. I'm not a couples therapist, but I recommended a couples therapist to a co-worker for some premarital counseling. My partner and I had really enjoyed our premarital sessions from this super nice therapist, and when a girl from my work got engaged she asked for his number. The day after their first session I got a call from the girl saying, "I can't believe you sent me to this horrible, invasive, rude counselor." I was in a panic. "Oh no, what happened?" she explained. We went in there and sat down and the first thing he asked was, "So, why do you want to get married? How rude is that? How dare he?" That's when I realized that maybe their relationship wasn't going to pan out. They called off the wedding a few months later. People who approach therapy with the idea that they must convince the therapist that they're right and their partner is wrong. Almost like they're complaining to a parent or boss to have them sort out the problems. Someone else's response made me think of this one. When a partner raises objection to meeting with me individually. During the first session I share that during assessment I like to meet with them both together and once each individually. Occasionally I'll have partners who suddenly become very critical or suspicious about this, asking why I do that, and is it ethical? And the classic, "I've never heard of a marriage counselor doing that before." It goes beyond curiosity or simply inquiring about practice. There is an incredulous and almost panicked tone to it. And sure enough, every single time, they turn out to be some variation of controlling, manipulative, abusive. Edit. Just to clarify for a few of the comments, I'm not talking about doing concurrent, ongoing individual and couples sessions. This is just a one-off individual assessment session. My first 3 sessions are usually 1. Couples session, 2. Partner A individual, and 3. Partner B individual. After that we are typically only as a couple, unless another one-off is needed for further assessment down the road. If needed, I refer out for ongoing concurrent individual or pause for more intensive individual. And thanks for the silver and awards. One partner says they're seeking your services to help them determine if they want to stay together. The other partner says they're seeking your services to make it so they stay together. Then it's about highlighting the points and allowing the person who is on the fence decide what they want, since the other person knows. Edit. I am sorry to be reading about how many people experience being the person who wanted to stay together when their partner was unsure. I hope that, whatever happened, you have found or are finding happiness again. When I see a couple in which one or both of the members are seeking to change something fundamental about the other person, we process where the need for the change comes from and the person with the issue evaluates whether it's a deal breaker for them or not. We work on acceptance and tolerance of others. I also recommend my couples are also in individual therapy on their own. Edit. Typing this on my phone. Period after first sentence should be a comma. Edit. Thanks for the awards, pals. Remember, we wake up every day and decide if we want to choose our partners. A long-term relationship is a multitude of days when you've woken up and said yes. Child and family therapist here. Not exactly couples therapy, but there are key family dynamics that set off red flags for interpersonal relationships within a family, whether it is between parents and kids, or simply kids. The most important piece comes from invalidation. This comes in many forms, from gaslighting to just simple denial of another's opinion. Most of the time one or both parties are simply trying to be heard on an emotional level with an event or topic that was brought up, but the other party takes this as a personal attack on their ideals. We've all heard of or know people who will literally disagree with anything you say simply because you said it. That's the invalidation I'm referring to. Cliché registered sign moral of the story. Attack the problem, not each other. People rarely have the exact same stance in a conflict, but usually, in healthy relationships, have very similar core values. While two parents may disagree on how to parent a child, authoritarian versus authoritative for example, the core value of caring about their children and wanting them to succeed is often the same. By determining they are within the same realm of issue, two parents with different ideals can see themselves as allies in a conflict rather than enemies. Two things that people believe are red flags of poor relationships are the amount of conflicts the couple has and yelling. Neither is inherently a characteristic of good or bad relationships, but may be perceived as more common in bad relationships. The reality of this situation is that healthy relationships actually have a comparable amount of conflicts, but more intensely focus on addressing the core issue rather than the beliefs and self-worth of the other. As for yelling, in this case it's an emotional response to not feeling heard. While not the best response to distress, it also isn't an indicator of poor communication skills. What is an indicator of poor communication is yelling over the other person in an attempt to invalidate their point. Semi-related example. I had two people who were seemingly incredibly upset at each other. Parent A felt that Parent B was out of the house too frequently and did not want to be a part of their children's life. Parent B felt that Parent A didn't understand how busy their work schedule was. The fight revolved around Parent B seemingly not caring about the kids, until Parent B explained they felt Parent A was better at parenting and felt like they were only escalating the children when they started to parent. Parent A's understanding of the argument quickly changed from "you don't love our children" to "you're scared to let our children down." As you can guess, the tone of the conversation changed dramatically and there was no longer a sense that Parent A and B were on opposing sides. The issue instead became helping build confidence in Parent B's parenting abilities, which Parent A was much more validating and supportive of. Not all cases are this clean-cut by any means. but I figured I'd demonstrate the basic idea of finding core values and attacking an issue together. My mom is a couples therapist and she says there are some people that she has told you're not going to work out on the first couple sessions. It's very easy to work out when one person knowingly prioritizes their own wants and needs over their partner's. Relationships like this are often doomed because the person simply doesn't care enough to make any meaningful change. Whataboutism. Instead of taking ownership and responsibility for their contribution to the degradation of the relationship, one or both parties simply point out an example of the other exhibiting a similar behavior. It's a red flag because it illustrates their lack of self-awareness and poor communication skills. Communication is key when trying to mend a tattered relationship because without respectful communication the conflict recovery process can never begin. In the conflict recovery model, both parties agree to the terms under which they will communicate. No yelling, no interrupting, no I told you so's, etc. Each party gets a chance to share how the other's actions make them feel. Then they each propose their solutions and identify where they made assumptions or where they got triggered and why. Then they identify where they're willing to compromise. Next we create an actionable plan with deadlines and we monitor the progress to see if the proposed solutions were effective. Everything can go to it. But once communication stagnates you're in real trouble. So even if you're arguing you're still doing okay. You just need to work on how you're communicating. Relationship therapist here. One of the biggest red flags I see when working with a new couple is when they've totally forgotten the good. Part of relationship therapy is reconnecting a couple with what they like about each other, what initially attracted them to each other, and what the positives are between them. When people come in and they've been so unhappy for so long that they actually can't remember what it was like to be in love, or to even like each other, they're just about hopeless. You don't have to be happy for therapy to work, but if you can't even reminisce about the good times, then the good times are probably over. Edit. This is clearly resonating with some folks. So I'd like to recommend a book. If you find yourself in this situation, check out Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson. She gives some solid explanations of how people get into this cycle, as well as some suggestions on how to try and navigate it. I'll just say that if you find yourself screaming "I'm not ducking" yelling at you, you might have a communication problem. Edit. I want to add a more thoughtful note, but I should also mention that I mainly work with individuals. Similar to what others have said, the reddest of flags for me is when clients try to get me to take sides. I can understand why people may do that every now and then during more difficult discussions, but if it happens consistently it's a huge problem. There are plenty of reasons that people may do this, but the reality is that therapy is meant to foster cooperation between partners. Feeling like you need the therapist on your side indicates you're approaching the relationship as a competition, not a cooperative interaction, and nothing good comes from that. Also, I once had a supervisor who did a great deal of couples work tell me that it has such a bad success rate because people rarely come before the relationship has crossed the point of no return. Unfortunately, that seems to be a very accurate description. I'm not a therapist, but my therapist straight face told me that there are worse options than divorce. Got divorced and it was the best thing that happened to me. I was in couples therapy. At the end of the first session, the therapist asked us to say one nice thing about each other. I went first, said something nice about him. Therapist asked him to say something, and he replied, "My mother always told me if you can't say something nice, say nothing. So I'll say nothing." Felt so sorry for the therapist. And yes, that's when I started planning my exit. I am now very happy in a new relationship and my revenge is to be living my beat life. Very happy now. Therapist. So you're considering ending the marriage? Wife. I am sick of all the Star Wars puns. Husband. Divorce is strong with this one. I was just talking about this case today. Years ago when I was starting out I had a female client come in and she reported anxiety, depression, etc. because her ex-husband was bothering her. I thought that was completely average and normal. So I asked her about it. She recounted many times that her and the ex clashed. I said, "You know, you don't have to interact with him and maybe just distancing yourself is the way to go." Then she told me that they still lived together and had no plans of moving. The red flag. Indicted I was dealing with two crazy people. High conflict relationships. If frequent and bitter conflict began a few months or less after the relationship began and continued, relationship therapy is going to be a RedditJar. Won't be helpful. Either the conflict will continue indefinitely or come to an end. Not just my opinion. The research supports this. Edit. If you've been there, I'd be interested to hear some stories about this. And so would other Redditors. If you were able to fix a high conflict relationship like this, that would be an interesting story too. Welp. They used meth together on a regular basis. They continued to cheat on one another, fighting in front of their kids, cheating in front of their kids, and oh wait, meth in front of their kids. When doing couples work, your client is the relationship itself, not person A acute or B. So of course we try to work it out, even knowing in our head there's no way in Duxville will these toxic mfs ever work this out. And believe me, I tried. I tried so hard until this thing happened that I will never forget and tell my students about all the time. Person B was like, why don't you tell him, me, about you sleeping with your nigga BF? Quick note, I'm black and will type this word out to illustrate the hurt this word can cause. At that point I was just like, nah, duck this. My dissertation was finished. I had maybe a month left at this spot before leaving the state. I just told them that we're done today and advised them to seek another therapist at the front desk because I was no longer able to accommodate them. Told the boss and I was Gucci. Really, I just wanted to reach over and slap the absolute crap out a dude. Other instances where the typical one person wants to save the relationship while the other person is halfway out the door. It's really depressing actually, because you feel for that individual and they are trying. But that other person has other plans. Many of the times the other person was actively cheating and the spouse either knew, or that person would tell me low-key after the session. I hated couples counseling. Y'all never came to me as a first step, only a last resort. Reading all of this just makes me realize how lucky I was to muster up the power to break up with my ex. I knew she was horrible and toxic towards the end of things, but holy it, it's worse than I thought. Not my client, but I had to watch as my own roommate dealt with her fiance. He was, capital A, controlling her, physically, activities, financials, capital B, continuously dismissing her feelings, assessments, opinions. Fiance would revert to baby talk, speaking to roommate like she was an uneducated child. Daddy knows best type of gaslighting garbage. Capital C, trying to hide his narcissistic tendencies behind his good church boy exterior. This was all happening in my condo while she was waiting to move out and marry him. I usually tried to stay out of their issues, but one afternoon I softly encouraged her, saying I agreed with her. An argument I'd witnessed earlier in the day. She came back that night after the fiance convinced her that I was jealous and was trying to break them up so I could have him. She barely talked to me again until she moved out. Sadly, they did get married, have 2 kids, and she's a completely isolated stay-at-home mom. I don't even want to imagine what it's like for her at home. Just for your information, it's a commonly known thing in psych that you shouldn't go to therapy with your abusers. Abusive people are manipulative and charming and liars. Society has already conditioned people to side with abusers against women. Therapists often end up thinking the victim is actually the abuser based on what the abuser spins up. Read Why Does He Do That? If you're curious about how to spot abuse. Edit. The replies to this are kind of proving my point. But women can be abusers, and society sides with women always. In a world where feminism had succeeded, the replies would have been, what can we do to eliminate bias in therapeutic practices? Or why does this happen? But nah, just people sucking. Narayosu's copyright airing. My grandaunt was a couples therapist for many years. Now she volunteers at her church counseling couples. She's my relationship sage. Number of red flags she's told me about. 1. Spouses who don't sleep together without a justifiable reason. As in, not due to work conflicts or medical reasons, but because one spouse just doesn't feel like going to bed alongside the other. Lack of intimacy, both sexual and non-sexual, will lead to the two drifting apart. 2. When one spouse has a close relationship with a member of the opposite sex who doesn't like the other spouse. The old he/she's just a friend. If it doesn't lead to cheating, it still will usually cause an needed strain that will break apart the relationship. 3. One that initially surprised me. We're staying together for the kids. It leads to an unhealthy mindset where the couple sees the children as a burden and believe that by remaining in an unhealthy relationship, it will somehow make the kids turn out alright. Kids are smarter than you think. And if mom and dad don't love each other, they'll pick up on it. If the kids are really the priority, either learn to fix the relationship or end it. 4. In premarital counseling. When the couple states that they're saving themselves for their wedding night, and then one or both confides privately that they're not a virgin and the other has no idea. In broader terms, when a couple isn't honest with each other about their sexual history. So many reasons that's unhealthy. I can't even begin to list them all. But the biggest is that honesty is the most solid foundation on which to build a relationship. If you're afraid of what your partner will think, ask yourself if you want to deal with it now or later. Deal with it now. The biggest problems she's dealt with are when it's clearly the fault of one member of the relationship and the other desperately wants to fix the issue. Like in the first instance, she told me of a couple where she understood that the wife wanted out of the relationship, but didn't want to directly confront her husband about it, while the husband thought the issue was just a minor problem. Turns out, the wife had to actually cheat in order for the husband to realize how serious things were, which led to him ending up on antidepressants and contemplating suicide. From what she told me, that one ended in acrimonious divorce. But she never told me what became of either party. Something she emphasizes is that people are often blind to the red flags that a therapist can spot right away. Such is the nature of being a trained professional. It's why she recommends people see a counselor even if they don't think their issues are that deep. It's not shameful to ask for help, she always says. Not a relationship therapist, but once worked with a woman whose boyfriend had sexually assaulted a client while he was at work, but she was convinced it was just a misunderstanding. So I knew that was a relationship that wouldn't last and that she struggled to pick stable partners. I was right. As a clinical psychologist, I focused mainly on behavioral medicine and cognitive assessment, but did my fair share of marriage couples work. Refusal or inability to compromise is a ginormous red flag, one that, I believe, is empirically validated. Compromise is a significant predictor of satisfaction in relationships, and it plays an important role in the long-term success of marriages and relationships in general. I'm reading through these as a mental checklist to keep in check my own actions, not just my partner's. Thanks everyone for sharing. Constant, needless escalation. When I don't think we need this expensive thing is escalated to you don't really love me major problem. It shows up quickly in therapy if you're watching for it. Mostly because the one using this to avoid accountability is almost guaranteed to play this card in relation to therapy itself. Either I had to drag them here or they're just trying to break up with me. What they're doing is avoiding conversation about the issue by blowing up into a bigger problem than it is, so they can make the other person respond to their feelings rather than dealing with their concerns. As long as there is no abuse, and all parties still have feelings of love or regard for the other, just about any relationship can be salvageable with a re-establishing, or in some cases, establishing for the first time, healthy communication patterns. Of course, all parties have to want to put in the work as well. Narayosarue copyright airing. Edit. Didn't expect to get this much conversation going, but glad so many people have felt comfortable talking about this. I want to clarify one thing. Not wanting to put in the work on a relationship does not automatically make someone a villain. It is very possible to decide from a place of compassion, and even love, that you and your partner, simply are at separate places in life, have opposing values, or perhaps are just not compatible. It can be the case that deciding to let go is an act of compassion. My original intent was only to say that when both parties are committed to fixing a non-toxic relationship, I've seen a lot of seemingly unreconcilable issues be settled. Searching for any identifiers of when me and my ex-wife tried therapy. When one person is entirely dependent on the other, especially at a relatively young age, I mean financially and emotionally, these are typically young women, sometimes young men as well, who do not work, do not have children, stay home all day and have no friends or hobbies outside of hanging out with their spouse. Very unhealthy. And a huge red flag. Always ends in a painful and messy breakup. Generally, we try to get them to find a friend, join a community, get a job or volunteer, something to provide them with self-worth and personal fulfillment outside of their spouse. Obligatory, not a therapist but my own experience in therapy. My wife and I, separated now, went to couples counseling where it was a husband-wife counseling team. I thought that would be great, since it may help us open up more having a member of both sexes there. My wife was hesitant about couples counseling, but agreed to try it. We had our initial session together and it was cold and difficult, as expected, and my wife said she still wanted to leave, but they convinced her to try a few more sessions to see if anything clicked as we opened up. We had an individual session the next time, and I thought it went fantastically. I gained a completely different understanding of intimacy, not sexual, but emotional and relational, and I was jazzed to start working at putting it into practice. My wife came out with tear stains and sat in her car crying before she finally left for home. We drove separately because she was coming from work and I from home. Our next appointment was another individual session. The male counselor and I were talking again, and he started digging into my expectations and desires in the relationship. What I loved about wife, etc. He point blank asked me, do you feel wife is a good match for you in life, and that you want to continue this relationship? And I was a little off put, but figured yeah, it's probably a good thing to establish that right off the bat. So I answered emphatically yes, and he just looked heartbroken and so very sad. I knew pretty well right then that we were toast. Wife admitted her affair the day before our next session and left. I'm a therapist, newer to couples counseling, but one of the flags I've seen is one person digging their heels in and not accepting any feedback or suggestions. Then that person tells me and partner that they are trying. I called him out on it, said that he needed to evaluate what he's willing to do and not do. Needless to say, didn't hear back from them. Another weird one is separating without a plan. All that's gonna do is teach you how to live without each other emo. I would ask them, okay, how do you know when the separation works? I don't know. When I start missing them, I guess, is what I typically hear. People are the worst at couples counseling. They keep asking, have you tried turning it off and on again? We need a serious tag for this OP. Good question though. Good question. I doubt I have much to add that others haven't already said, but the biggest one I notice is respect. Respecting space, boundaries, feelings, interests. Relationships are also important, and lack of respect by either person for the other is going to mean big problems. I would definitely try to help them work through it, but it's hard to point out to someone that something they are doing is hurting the other. Which leads to my second red flag. Lack of communication lol. My mom is a therapist and she sometimes tells me a little bit about her cases, nothing specific or identifying. She once came home really upset about a case and told me a little bit. Basically, this guy sent his wife in because she was having trouble with the baby. He came with her and interrupted her at basically every turn and basically told my mom his wife was bipolar. In another session, the patient admitted she almost felt angry with the baby and herself because she knew she would be a terrible mother. Her husband had been saying it since she got pregnant. My mom told me it became almost instantly clear that the husband was manipulative and abusive, and probably trying to stop her from connecting with the child. As soon as my mom suggested she was angry with her husband and not her baby, all of their future sessions were cancelled. I've seen individuals but did coursework in couples therapy. It's always a dooming sign when one of the patients doesn't want to be there and is unwilling to try. Those never end well. Late to the party. But here goes. My most favorite exercise in couples counseling is to have them listen to 45 seconds 1 minute of instrumental music. Think Lorena Mickennett, Greensleeves or something like that. Music that people don't really usually listen to. Then I ask person A to tell person B what they imagined while they were listening to the music. Then person B shares the same. Then we listen to the same music again, but I ask person A to try and see what person B, and vice versa, imagined, and pay attention to what they think feel when they do that. Interesting dynamics come up immediately. I'll share my own personal story here from when my own couples therapist did this with an ex and I. Me. Oh, I imagined myself wearing a long, billowing green dress walking through a green valley. Think Scotland or Ireland. A remote castle was at the top of the hill and my scarf was flying in the wind. There was a gently, bubbly stream somewhere there too. I imagined myself on a cliff with the ocean waves crashing violently on the rocks. There was a storm with lightning and thunder. I was cold. Awesome therapist. Credit where credit is due. He was awesome. Okay, let's do that again. But try to see if you can visualize what the other person imagined. Okay, music clip played again. Me. Inner thoughts. Okay, so the cliff. Yeah, I can see that. But come on now. A storm and violent waves? No way. Bubbly stream is so clear here. Cock so waves and, what did he say again? Cold? That's so stupid. It's a nice, warm day. Maybe a bit windy, but if it evoked cold I would have never imagined myself in a dress. Wait, I'm supposed to be imagining his scenario. It just didn't fit. Why did he? When will this be over? Okay, so tell me how that went. I tried. I really did. But I started visualizing her scene and it was so off. I mean, I'll give her the green and all. But, me, why do you always invalidate what I perceive? Never mind that I had just done the same in my head with him BTW. So, anyone want to analyze the twisted dynamics that were at play during our whole relationship there? I laugh gently while I tell you guys this. But they were very clear from the outside and very confusing and combative from the inside. Also imho, and sometimes not so humble. All therapists should experience couples counseling. Not only did it change the way I practiced it myself, but it literally changed the way I built future relationships. And yes, this is a glowing endorsement for that part of therapy that I choose not to practice a lot. If one is ever on the fence about going to couples counseling, know that while it might not save this relationship, it will save you and subsequent ones. It will give you the tools to communicate with other partners in the future, or will give you insight on how you love and relate to others in ways individual counseling sometimes doesn't. Anyway, I adopted this exercise into my repertoire and am continually amazed at how revealing it is. Big red flag when we do this. Person J has trouble expressing what they visualized. Person K has zero trouble. Then person J reports they can 100% see what person K visualized and person K is very critical of person G's experience or heavily indulgent. Oh yeah, I saw it. What did you think while visualizing it? I was doing the exercise correctly. Symbiotic relationships, codependency, narcissism and abuse are things I immediately screen for if this is the result. Finally, don't go to couples counseling if your partner is abusive. It doesn't work. It won't work. You will give the other person the tools and language to make you feel even worse and there will be heavy retaliations at home if you reveal the truth. Not worth it. Go by yourself if you know or suspect abusive markers in your relationship.